Stephen Curry. Stephen Curry. Stephen Curry.
Welcome back to another episode of the Bay Area Beat. I want to start off today by talking about just what an unbelievable transformation the Warriors have undergone since the Jimmy Butler trade just a month ago. After being 13-23 in their 36 games leading up to the trade and looking completely dead in the water, the Dubs are 11-1 in games in which Jimmy plays, and Steph looks like his old self, averaging nearly 35 points a game and playing his best basketball since the 2022 NBA Finals. Now, today's episode is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to do a short open about the Dubs and my experience watching them in person this past week. We'll also pay an homage to the great Wardell Stephen Curry. And then I'm going to have my brother on where we're going to discuss the last Warriors stretch in depth and also look ahead to the next 20-game sprint and some playoff matchups. Let's get into it. So like I mentioned last week, after college, I moved to New York City and I've been here for the last 4 years. Because of this, I only get to see one, maybe two Warrior games every year. This year, I really wanted to see the Knicks in Madison Square Garden. I've been to MSG a couple times, but never for the Warriors. The bittersweet part about being a Warrior fan while Steph has been on the team is, although you get to root for the most tantalizing guy in professional sports 80 to 100 times a year, they're always the most expensive ticket out there. While I love my Dubs as much as anyone, I couldn't justify spending $350 to sit at the top of the nosebleeds, at least not at my current income. Also, unlike the Chase Center where there isn't a bad view in the house, when you get up high at MSG, there are lots of obstructed views, and you can often feel like you're miles away from the action. So instead, I saved a couple $100 and watched the game at a Knicks bar with some buddies. And after what was one of their best wins of the season, I did have some regrets about not pulling the trigger. So I told myself, regardless of the cost, I would not miss the Nets game 2 days later. And let me tell you, I was not alone. I saw more Steph Curry jerseys at Barclays than all Nets combined. There were Davidson Steph jerseys, We Believe ones, and every iteration since. While the game wasn't quite as loud as Chase and definitely not as loud as Old Oracle Arena, it felt like a home game from the opening introductions as Steph got easily the loudest cheer on either team. Obviously, the game didn't go according to plan. The Warriors went down 27-5 midway through the first quarter, while the Dubs came out sluggish, probably from having one too many tequila sodas at Draymond's 35th birthday party, which, as a side note, from the videos really looked like a team that genuinely likes each other, or maybe that was just the tequila talking, but the Nets also came out at an unsustainable rate, shooting 9 for 10 from the field and hitting 6 threes in the first 6 minutes of the game. And while digging themselves that big of a hole early has been the nail in the Warriors' coffin the last couple seasons, since the Jimmy trade, they've shown that they are a team that can handle and overcome adversity. Even though the game looked bleak early, as a fan, I never felt like the game was out of reach and knew that Brooklyn would eventually stop making every shot they took. The game shifted when Steph, after being frustrated that the Nets weren't getting any foul calls despite being super physical on him, drove into Keon Johnson's chest, got an offensive foul, and then Steve Kerr followed that up with a tech. That clearly pissed the team off and lit a fire under Steph, which, as Isaiah Stewart of the Pistons learned last night, is never a good idea. Steph did hit a couple tough shots in the paint, but the Warriors still trailed by 20 to the Nets at the end of the first quarter when Steph was subbed out. The comeback actually started in the non-Steph minutes when Jimmy took control of the offense. He was the catalyst, slowing everything down, allowing them to go into their offensive sets. He finally showed some aggression that felt missing the first half of the road trip. Butler dominated the Nets bigs inside, scoring on 3 straight possessions in the paint, and driving and kicking to get Quentin Post wide open for 2 threes. By the time Steph came back in around the 6-minute mark of the second quarter, the lead was trimmed to 11, and the game felt very much in the balance. Once he checked back in, Steph had a mini Curry flurry, hitting back-to-back threes from the exact same spot on the left wing. I kept telling myself, just cut the lead to 10 by halftime. Luckily for me, the Warriors did a little more than I had hoped, as down 8 with 2 seconds left in the half, Steph hit the most insane shot I've ever seen in person, and I would argue one of the most difficult shots of Steph's career. Jimmy kicked it to Steph, who was doubled at the logo with no time to even get a dribble off. He caught the ball with his back turned, not facing the basket, took one pivot step, and created a bit of separation by fading away off one leg, and threw up a shot with an arc that could have even hit the Jumbotron. And of course, he banged it. The only comparable shot I can remember from Steph's career was during the Olympics this past year when he hit the golden dagger over Nicolas Batum and Evan Fournier to help lead Team USA to Olympic gold over France. That shot in Paris obviously had a lot more on the line, but this one in Brooklyn was a higher degree of difficulty and was 5 or 6 feet further. Once the Warriors cut it from 20-5 heading into the half and had the momentum from Steph's heroics, the rest of the comeback felt inevitable. While Steph is going to get the majority of the credit, and rightfully so, dropping 40 on elite efficiency, Jimmy was instrumental, particularly while Steph was off the court when they usually flounder. I think it was easily Butler's best game as a Warrior, and watching it live, you could just tell how meaningful of a difference maker he is, both offensively and defensively, to what they had in the first half of the season. This comeback doesn't happen without Jimmy. They've now had 2 20-point comebacks in the 12 games with Butler, where they only had one in the 51 games in the first half of the season. Now, I have to be completely honest. Earlier in the season, while I used the excuse that Steph didn't have help around him to explain his struggles, or maybe I should say struggles compared to his last 10 years of his career, internally, I started to get worried that Father Time was beginning to take another victim, and that Steph no longer had what it took to be the best player on a finals contending team. His scoring was down, his efficiency was down, and it didn't seem like he had the same level of confidence in himself that he had always shown. But I think it's been made abundantly clear the last dozen or so games that Steph hadn't lost confidence in himself. Rather, it was the team's makeup and what they could accomplish. Watching him look revitalized since the Jimmy Butler trade has been such a joy to watch. He clearly has regained the faith in his teammates and that this Warriors team can actually make a run. Even if it's not a championship, which at this point I wouldn't put past him, but regardless, the Dubs are finally playing meaningful basketball for the first time in years. I'm not a religious person, so I hope this doesn't offend anyone, but watching Steph Curry play at this level is like how I imagine devout Christians feel about going to church. He is truly a one-of-one player, not only with his unparalleled shot making, but his incredible movement without the ball. When I'm watching Steph, it's one of the only times where I am fully in trance, not looking at my phone or letting anything else distract me. He has a magnetic play style as well as a charisma and childlike joy playing basketball that you can see through the TV. He's the greatest showman on earth in any sport or any profession. Obviously, anybody will tell you that he's changed the game of basketball, but more importantly, he built a winning culture in the Bay that hadn't been seen in 40 years. It's still mind-boggling to me that a week before his 37th birthday, he's playing the best basketball in years and is still a top 10, top 5 player in the NBA. While he may not have the same level of athleticism as he once did during his back-to-back MVP seasons, he's smarter and more adaptive to what defenses are throwing at him than he's ever been. I try to watch every Warrior game, not just because I'm an obsessive fan, but I'm also a realist, and I know that we're on the back nine of Steph's career and probably realistically heading towards the 16th hole. And whenever he hangs it up, I can say with certainty that there will never be a player like him, and that I will never love a player as much as I have cherished watching Steph Curry. So cheers to Steph on reaching 25,000 points, and let's just hope he has another 5,000 left in the tank. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll have our first ever guest on.
Stephen Curry. Stephen Curry.
What's up, brother? Welcome to the pod.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. You're our first guest of the Bay Area Beat. Who better than the little bro? So How we feeling about the Dubs? 11-1 since Jimmy Butler joined on.
Honestly, very optimistic. I was excited by the trade. Felt like we really gave up a lot for him, but really didn't expect this sort of instant dramatic change to sort of come from the trade. It really looks like everyone on the Warriors is looking better. I mean, Pods has been completely different. Steph is really looking like he has for the past few years. When the start of the season, it kind of looked like he'd taken a step back. I think he's averaging like over 30 points a game since Jimmy Butler's been on the Warriors. So it's just great to see a completely new Warriors team, and finally sort of having hope and enjoying watching the Warriors every time they play.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It's like the actual fun factor in watching them. I feel like, you know, we're still watching every game, even in that pretty terrible stretch in January where they're losing, 2 out of 3 games every night, and offensively they were looking like one of the worst teams in the NBA. But I think watching Steph, we can talk more as we go about if they're actually like a finals contending team, but they have the pieces around him that are actually suited for his skill set. He has guys like Jimmy that are able to get inside, draw 2 defenders, and Steph can kind of, do Steph Curry like things. And yeah, like you said, he's at like 35 a game almost since Jimmy's come on some of the best efficiency since his unanimous MVP season, which has really been awesome. What do you think the ceiling is around this team?
Frankly, it's hard to say, sort of manage my bias and true feelings about the team, but I think a true ceiling is the Western Conference Finals. I think the West is so strong, and it has been for the last few years. But some of the younger, really strong teams are finally maturing a bit, and they have sort of now that talent, but also some of that playoff experience. I'm honestly, frankly, worried about the Thunder, and then the post Luka Lakers trade really makes the West seem really difficult to get out of. But I do think it's a possibility. But I think a Western Conference Finals appearance would be great for this Warriors team.
Are you thinking the Lakers and the Thunder are the 2 best teams in the West that kind of separate themselves from the rest?
I do. I have to throw in the Nuggets in there just because
Yeah,
Jokic. I mean, the Nuggets really aren't a good team, but they have the best player in the NBA.
by far
I
too.
was Yeah, and it's shocking me. I mean, I was watching that Thunder Nuggets game earlier today, and Shea is really a great, amazing player. I mean, puts up at least pretty much 30 points every game, but I do feel like there's just a separation between Jokic and the rest of the NBA. And it's crazy because it seems like Shea is betting wise really the heavy MVP favorite. But Jokic is putting up seems like his best ever season. I mean, just dropped 30, 20, and 20 the other night.
That was
Um,
insane.
yeah, and that's why it's like even on a pretty bad Nuggets team, other than Jokic, they're definitely dangerous. But I do think that the Thunder and the Lakers are the 2 best teams in the West right now.
Yeah, I think the Thunder are certainly, in their own echelon, in their own tier in the West. But I think just with like how tough of a matchup the Nuggets are for the Warriors, there isn't a true center on the Warriors. You're gonna have a lot more Kevon Looney in that series than you would in a Lakers or even Thunder series. I don't think that would be a great matchup for him. I'd probably rather see the Nuggets than the Lakers. I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, and the 5 seed is still in play, which would be more of a Grizzlies or Rockets matchup, which I think the Warriors would match up really well with. I think they might even be favored in either of those series. But even the Thunder, who pretty much dominated that game today against the Nuggets, like they have Jalen Williams, they have Chet Holmgren, but Shea takes twice as many shots as any other player on that team. And in a playoff series, if you have a combination of Jimmy and Moody and Pods really putting the bulk of their time on Shea and locking him up, like I think there's going to be a hard time to have these other guys score in really meaningful basketball. They're all very young, second, third year guys, and you know I don't want to say they're a regular season team, but I would think that the Nuggets are still, in my mind, a bigger threat come playoffs when you're playing every other day, and Jokic has more time to rest in between games. He didn't have a great game today. It looked like he hurt his elbow at some point during the game and took a hard fall, but he was also coming off, like you said, his 30-20-20 overtime game less than 36 hours ago, and there really isn't that in the NBA playoffs. You have at most a game every other day. And I think rest is going to be, a critical component for the Warriors, as they're one of the oldest teams in the NBA, particularly in the Western Conference, which is filled with really young, talented teams. So I think all three of those. LeBron did get ruled out, or LeBron is going to be out the next couple of weeks with his groin injury. I am kind of curious still, like what that team's going to look like without a true center. I mean, the Warriors are kind of the same thing there. They have Quentin Post and Kevon Looney playing stretches, but it's a different team, and Draymond can really kind of play that center position. You're going to have Rui Hachimura playing big, important minutes in crunch time, and he's undersized. And as much as Luka's a significantly better player than AD, what gave the Warriors the most trouble during the Laker Warriors playoff series 2 years ago, and even during the regular season, has been AD, and he's been just an absolute matchup nightmare for them. So I think having him out of the fold is actually going to be, I'm not going to say easier for the Warriors, because like I said, Luka is Luka Doncic, but I would be more excited to go against the Lakers than I would the Thunder. Is there a dream playoff matchup for you in the first? Maybe taking those three teams aside, is like either the Rockets or the Grizz.
I mean, yeah, I think definitely the Rockets and the Grizzlies are both, and I think out of the two, it's got to be the Rockets, just because they're even younger, and I don't think, unlike the Grizzly, they don't really have that number one solid guy. I mean, Şengün's really good, but he's not sort of that standout guy who can sort of, when the going gets tough, take over and lead the Rockets. And I think because of that, and because of how young they are, they'll struggle against a really experienced, intelligent team like the Warriors. And I think that would be a really good matchup for the Warriors that they could win in five.
Yeah, it seems. I mean, I don't. A podcast is born to just keep agreeing with each other, but I don't really think there is a scenario where they get to the Rockets. That's a perfect world. They'd have to kind of climb up a few games on the Grizz, and then we'd have to overpass the Grizz. Right now, the Warriors are sitting with the inside track at that 6th seed, and as of now, the 6th seed would be playing the Nuggets, which again I don't think would be a good matchup for them. But I really think if they're able to go with 20 games left in the season, if they're able to go 15-5, which I think is realistic with their schedule, they can sneak into that 5 seed. And I think even if they went against the Grizzlies, we saw how that happened in 2022, and that's really not a very different Grizzlies team. Triple J has taken a step up, and is definitely a better player than he was 2 years ago, but I would be elated to go against the Grizzlies, frankly, and honestly would probably rather catch the Thunder in that 4-1 matchup in the second round rather than late when they're hitting their groove. Completely. I think we're in sync there. What do you think Kuminga is going to look like when he makes his return? It seems like it's going to be this upcoming Monday against the Blazers. It's definitely going to be an interesting fit. He kind of, Butler's playing the far better Kuminga role as a guy that gets the majority of his work in the paint and gets a lot of isolated one-on-one action. But where do you kind of see him fitting in the offense?
Yeah, I think it's a little hard to say, because I think at times Kuminga has struggled sort of with his own identity or role with the Warriors, both sort of spending a lot of time coming off the bench, and also starting a lot of times. But I think hopefully he can find his spot with the Warriors before playoff time comes around. I think the Warriors team, both sort of personnel and sort of the minutes that players are getting, is completely different than before his injury happened. So he's coming into a very different situation. But I think he's probably going to be coming off the bench, especially to start. But that will be sort of his central role, as we're probably going to want to keep Pods and Moody in the starting lineup for shooting around Steph. But I think I think Butler's really going to help Kuminga develop both offensively and defensively, and will just be someone that both playing on the court with him at the same time is going to draw attention and allow for sort of Kuminga to get to the basket, and Butler's a great passer. So I think it's really going to help him, because there'll be less attention on the court with him, especially with those like sort of non-Steph Butler minutes where both Butler and Kuminga are on the court. And I think it'll be good for him just having more IQ around him, because he's so sort of athletic and still has so much to develop. So that'll be good for him. But yeah, I think he will be a really strong piece off the bench for the
Yeah,
Warriors.
that's where I see him too, on the off the bench. And honestly, like in a perfect world, I actually see him and Jimmy's minutes mostly being staggered, not playing as much together. Like you said, they are both non-shooters. I think Jimmy made his third three in 12 games with the Warriors, and Kuminga shoots him a little more often than Jimmy does, but he's still a low 30% shooter. When Jimmy and Dre go off the court, bench comes on, Steph stays on the court, and then they kind of flip flop. So it's like Steph in the bench, and then it's Jimmy, Dre, Pods, kind of running the second unit. And in my mind, I think Kuminga would be a perfect fit alongside Steph, where he's drawing attention inside, particularly at the end of first and third quarters, like when Pods and Dre and Jimmy are off the court. The only thing is, I talked about this in another episode. I'm not really sure if he has the same processing and speed to really play alongside this team. This team is incredibly smart. They're obviously an older team and won't have the athleticism to keep up with the Thunder or the Nuggets, but what they do have is their intelligence, is how long they've kind of each played in the league and been able to kind of understand what defenses throw at them. And I just think Kuminga at times, while he definitely wants to go out and get his own shot and is a great one-on-one isolated scorer, I have a hard time seeing him fully adapt to that offense where he doesn't always need to be the first option, and he can draw two inside, but then he can kick out to an open Steph or an open Moody. And I really hope, he is able to kind of catch speed, but we have 20 games left in the season, less than about 5 weeks. And I think it's kind of a lot to ask. And if Steve Kerr, as we know, he gets real tight with rotations in the playoffs, if he doesn't feel confident with how Kuminga's playing and the speed at which he's playing these last few weeks of this season, I wouldn't be surprised if I don't want to say like getting DNPs come playoffs, but he might be just short stretches, get some energy burst guy playing, 12, 18 minutes a night.
Certainly. I think in a lot of ways, sort of what you've been saying, a best case scenario for him would be um, increasing that processing speed a bit, just being surrounded now by Jimmy on top of Dre and Steph, but also just some scoring off the bench and some hardcore defense coming off the bench, just locking down a wing or a guard on the other team.
Yeah, no, I agree. Going on I guess the other side, looking at the negatives a little bit. How are you feeling about Buddy Hield? I know how I've been feeling lately, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Just a bit disappointed. I feel like we've fallen victim to the Buddy Hield cycle a bit, where he just starts off incredible, being somehow an MVP candidate to start the season, and now just a pretty inconsistent, at times unreliable player. I think it's tough because our bench is just increasingly looking stronger. I mean, we'll have Kuminga coming off the bench. Gary Payton's been pretty healthy lately, which is great, and a great piece. Quentin Postman's looking good, and it just makes it harder for someone like Buddy Hield, who can be great at times, but most of all is inconsistent, which is not something our Warriors team is looking for. It makes it hard for him to sort of get consistent minutes, and we don't know what we're going to get out of him. So I don't know what his role will be come playoff time, but if he continues to show his inconsistency, I don't think it'll be a large one.
Yeah, that's just it for me too, is the inconsistency. And frankly, it's been consistently bad, honestly, since November. Like he's had good moments. He had a really important putback dunk last night against the Pistons, but he went 0 for 8 from the field against the Nets. I think he went 1 for 6 against the Pistons last night. When Steph and the starters are getting their minutes ramped up come playoffs, I really just don't see where his role is. And when he's not scoring, like he had a few good defensive possessions last night and had a really good steal in the second quarter, but when he's not scoring, he really isn't providing that much else. Like he can play good help defense, but he's not the facilitator that Jimmy or Pods is. And I think I've kind of hit my point where I'm over the Buddy Hield experience. I'm fine with him getting limited minutes in these last couple of weeks of the season as long as it's not costing us games, but I just don't trust when he's shooting that he's going to score and that the ball's going to go in. And I agree with what we're saying on Hield. I think I'm a little more negative than you, and I think we've seen enough bad basketball since, he was shooting 55% from three the first 2 weeks of the season, where it feels like that's more of who he is. In the first 10 games were more of a kind of a miracle, if anything. And yeah. What did you think last night about Draymond shooting that dagger three, which ended up working out? I frankly, when he shot it and we were down one with 55 seconds left, I was about to tear my hair out. But
Yeah, frankly, right when you're taking the shot, my stomach sunk a bit. But I
yeah,
mean, he hit the shot, and that's all that matters. I don't necessarily love that shot with some time on the shot clock and a minute left in the game. But Draymond is someone who makes things happen at the end of the game, makes plays. Often it's on the defensive end or sort of as the point forward, making a good pass. But um, he will hit big shots, and he'll take a shot if he's open. And he can't hit the three ball when he's open. So I didn't love it, but I was happy with the outcome.
he made it happen. He still loves to do his rage challenges where he's demanding Steve Kerr to challenge a play where he clearly fouled the guy. But look, if he's gonna hit that three, whether it's as inconsistent as it is, I'll take it. So before we close out, again, really appreciate you coming on. Looking at the standings right now, the Warriors are 3.5 back of the Grizz, who are going to be playing in about 10 minutes, and they're 3 back of the Rockets with 20 to play. You want to take a prediction here, or are they going to stay as the 6th seed? They're also, I should say, half game up on the Timberwolves and only a game and a half up on the Clippers for the 7 and 8 seed. So as confident and as awesome as they've played as of late, the play-in's very much in play. So let's hear. Do you have any predictions about where they finish?
I really think they're going to keep surging, and I really think a 5 seed is possible for them, even possibly a 4 seed. I mean, that's really reaching a bit, but looking at the Rockets and Grizzlies, they've really come down to earth in the last couple of weeks. I mean, Grizzlies in their last 10 are 3-7, and the Rockets in the last 10 are 5-5, and the Warriors are 9-1. I mean, the only two teams 9-1 in the West in the last 10 games, the Warriors and Thunder. And maybe the Warriors won't keep up that insane stretch, but they really have been elite both offensively and defensively over the last few weeks with Jimmy Butler. So I think they'll continue to sort of surge, and the Grizzlies and Rockets will continue to be good, but not as good as they've been earlier in the season. I think they're coming back down to reality a bit. So I think they really could push for a 5 seed and even possibly a 4 seed, but I don't think that they will necessarily have to risk a play-in with falling below the 6 seed.
Yeah. Just to give some added context, I'm looking at strength of schedule rest of season, and we got Memphis with the 12th most difficult strength of schedule, Warriors right behind them at 13th, and then Houston at 16th. So strength of schedule shouldn't really be making a huge difference here. They're all kind of right in the same boat. And yeah, the Warriors are, I don't think anyone would argue with you to say that they're playing better basketball as of late than both of them. They're right now 4th in offensive efficiency since Jimmy Butler came on, 2nd in defensive efficiency, and 3rd in net. And we're reaching the point where it's no longer a small sample size. It's 12 games. It's March where really important basketball is being played, where teams are starting to separate themselves, and every game in the standings is incrementally important, especially as tight as the West is, when 2 games separate the 6 seed, where you're out of the play-in, and the 9 seed. And I guess looking also, Minnesota does have the 27th most difficult, the 4th easiest schedule rest of season. So I do think out of that group of play-in teams, I'm not really worried about the Clippers. I'm definitely not worried about Dallas post Kyrie injury, or really Sacramento. But I do think, as good as the Warriors are playing, they don't really have any room for error. And Minnesota is a half game back and is going to be kind of on their ass the rest of the season, and has a lot easier schedule than the Warriors. So I think 15-5 is really around where they need to be to stay out of the play-in and avoid the Thunder and avoid whoever wins between the Nuggets and Lakers. But I think this is a good place to end it. I really appreciate you hopping on, Harrison. This was a great time, and we'll have to have you back come playoffs.
Certainly. Love it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, take care, man.